So I was just enjoying some time off during my Christmas break, replaying Breath of the Wild for the 6th time or so, and I suddenly thought to myself, why do I always come back to Breath of the Wild and not Tears of the Kingdom? I mean, Tears of the Kingdom is the newer game and it's the sequel that's supposed to be better, right? So I do what every other logical Breath of the Wild enjoyer does, and I start making a list of all the things that Breath of the Wild does better at Tears of the Kingdom. But before this, I do some research to see if anyone else feels the same. Wait, why are there all these videos about people hating on Tears of the Kingdom? I thought everyone thought Tears of the Kingdom was the better game when it first came out. What happened? Hello friends, my name is Forge. I'm not involved in the Zelda community itself at all, but it seems like a lot of people have had a sudden change of heart regarding Tears of the Kingdom. I was very surprised to see how many people have started to turn their backs on the game. I mean, I love Breath of the Wild, and I think it's a lot better than Tears of the Kingdom, but it's not like Tears of the Kingdom is necessarily a bad game. I mean, I don't like it at all, but some people really like it, and that's good for them. So after watching 20 videos about some people advocating for Breath of the Wild and some advocating for Tears of the Kingdom, here are 10 big things that I strongly believe Breath of the Wild did better than Tears of the Kingdom. Which may or may not make it the better game, I'm not necessarily trying to convince you of that. When Breath of the Wild first released in 2017, I think it's fair to say that almost everyone was blown away at how amazing the game looked and felt. At the time, the most recently released Zelda game was Triforce Heroes, which was released in 2015. We went from this to this in 2 years. Most of Breath of the Wild's world felt unlike anything we've ever experienced before. Sure, the lushy green grass, the ice, fire, and desert regions are not new on paper, but their execution and appearance in Breath of the Wild made them feel new even though they're technically not. That theme of using traditional Zelda characteristics like familiar biomes, Link saving Hyrule, Zelda needing saving, and Ganon needing opposition, but in a modern way, is what makes Breath of the Wild itself and its atmosphere feel so distinct compared to previous Zelda games. Nintendo knew this. They knew what they had created geographically in Breath of the Wild was far superior to anything before in the Zelda franchise. The first exposure the player gets to the outside world is simply breathtaking. Just from this glance, the player sees a vast, expansive landscape so huge that it almost intimidates you. As you start to explore and gain access to the paraglider, you realize that this world is so much bigger than your first initial glance. Wherever you go, the biomes keep changing. So much to explore, so much to discover, so much unknown. You're in a brand new world, bigger than anything you could have dreamed of, and yet, you have the freedom to go wherever you desire. With no strict directional guidance after the Great Plateau, you almost start to feel somewhat isolated, traveling across a towering yet peaceful world all by yourself. The adventure starts to settle within. The decision to recycle all of Breath of the Wild's world into Tears of the Kingdom is very questionable in my opinion. What I find questionable about the decision is not the fact that they brought the whole map back, but how little it was changed. It's important to understand that yes, this game was Breath of the Wild sequel, so Nintendo wanted Tears of the Kingdom to obviously feel like a sequel, but not a brand new game altogether. I wanted Tears of the Kingdom to feel different too. The memories and feelings I had about Breath of the Wild were precious to me. I didn't want the two games to feel the same because they were supposed to be different. However, in Tears of the Kingdom, much of the map is geographically the same. Some notable differences are the Bokoblin camps, Lookout Landing, and probably most importantly the wells and the caves. Seems like most people were satisfied with these changes at first, but I wasn't. I wanted more to change on a surface level, what I could see all around me. I didn't want to feel like I was playing in Breath of the Wild, but too many times I felt like I was because the terrain looked the exact same as it did in Breath of the Wild. But then I started to think to myself, well maybe if the geography is mostly the same, then maybe the biomes changed, but they didn't. But the overworld map was never the selling point of Tears of the Kingdom. It was the new territory available. And according to the marketing, this was the sky. The sky was supposed to be the difference maker, the reason for Tears of the Kingdom's existence. And what did Nintendo do? They forgot their focal point. Not only are the Sky Islands so few in number, but the Sky Islands themselves are so barren. At first I thought Tears of the Kingdom was going to be the great game it was marketed to be based off the introduction on the Great Sky Island, a Breath of the Wild sequel focusing most of the time in the sky. But after the Great Sky Island, the Sky Islands quickly fade away from any importance or relevance. Aside from the Rito and Zora phenomena and starting Minoru Spirit Temple, the sky doesn't really serve any mission-based purposes. What the few Sky Islands do offer are shrines, Koroks, pieces of gear, and home to the Sun-Delion flower, which are useful for the depths. However, just getting up to these Sky Islands can be quite tedious and inconvenient, so if you don't really care about that extra side stuff, you hardly spend any time in the sky when you think about it. Even if there was actually more to do in the sky, all the Sky Islands feel the same because of their very similar design. This sense of familiarity is only increased due to the reality that there are so few of these islands to discover, creating a dull, monotone sky atmospheric experience. It's a shame how underwhelming the Sky Islands turned out in Tears of the Kingdom. What was supposed to be the shiny new addition to Breath of the Wild sequel resulted in a criminally undercooked disappointment.
It's raw! It's f***ing raw!
But one could argue that the depths were a bigger disappointment. After all, the game starts you off in the depths. Just like the Great Sky Island introduction, it feels like the depths are really cool. An underground area with hidden murals and secrets just waiting for you to discover. But once you lose all your abilities like stamina and hearts in a Metroid-like fashion, you never get that same feeling back when you re-enter the depths. You realize that the depths are just a dark underground world that looks and feels the same no matter where you are. Unlike the sky, the depths are expansive though. They take up about the same area as the overworld, sectioned off by the main rivers and lakes. Sadly, despite its size, the depths offer very little. You do have to complete the fire and spirit temples down here and fight Koga if you want, but it should offer way more considering it's similar in size to the overworld. The atmosphere in the depths is what's most depressing though. Just like the sky, it's one shared biome. Even after you activate the light route, only the lighting changes. I guess the Goron region does have the same temperature effect with some lava, but there's no snow, no sand, rain, lightning, or anything else in the depths. It's just the same dark, dry atmosphere. To recap the atmosphere section, Breath of the Wild was something completely out of the water. Its world incorporated very familiar concepts, but executed in a way that made the atmosphere feel brand new. Tears of the Kingdom brought this overworld back, changing very little. Its new additions, the Sky Islands and Depths, were lackluster, falling straight on their faces. The Sky offers very little with a one-biome-fits-all atmosphere, while the Depths suffer from an insufficiency of things to do, coupled with a boring, monotone atmosphere. What were supposed to be Tears of the Kingdom's main new selling points failed to achieve any form of diversity whatsoever. While we're talking about atmosphere, I'd like to take a quick moment to compare the situation of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom to Subnautica and Below Zero. Now for those of you who don't know about Subnautica, it's an underwater survival game. It's really good and I would definitely recommend it. But Subnautica captured that same feeling that Breath of the Wild produced. A huge, intimidating, unknown world waiting for you to explore. Its biomes were even more diversified than Breath of the Wild's, to be honest. The two games encapsulate that feeling of being alone. Sure, this isn't everyone's ideal atmosphere, but both games are regarded highly by most. Below Zero, the follow-up game to Subnautica, didn't reuse Subnautica's world like Tears of the Kingdom did with Breath of the Wild. Considering how much time you spend in the water, you hardly ever walk in Subnautica because there's very little for you to actually walk on. Below Zero changed this phenomenon. Instead of doing almost no walking, you do a lot of it in Below Zero. The problem? Just like Tears of the Kingdom's new sky and depths area, the islands and areas you walk on have the same biome everywhere you go. There are so many other things wrong with Below Zero and Tears of the Kingdom, but one biome for an entire new territory is a big one for sure.
Dear Mario,
you're pregnant.
Please come to the castle. Peach.
I'm not gonna lie, I really don't like introductions in Zelda, so this one's actually pretty tough for me. Both the Great Plateau and the Sky Island actually do a pretty good job of introducing the player to the game and its unique runes and abilities. Something special that the Sky Island did that I really liked is that it forces the player to use the abilities gained from the shrines to reach the other shrines. Since Tears of the Kingdom has different runes from Breath of the Wild, this exposes the player to the key difference from Breath of the Wild, which is good, in one sense. The reason why I like the Great Plateau better though, is because it's original, unlike Tears of the Kingdom. What do you do in Tears of the Kingdom's introduction? You wake up in a dark building, exit out into a cutscene, walk around, complete 4 shrines, and then you go to the temple. This layout is conceptually the exact same as Breath of the Wild. Even the one cold snowy region was recycled into this introduction. Now I get it, Tears of the Kingdom is a sequel, but it doesn't have to follow the same opening format as its predecessor. It felt different when we started in the depths, but then it was Breath of the Wild's opening all over again, just with a different color of paint. Call it lazy, call it ingenuity, but the reality is that it's still the same concept. Now, I didn't enjoy either, but I enjoyed Breath of the Wild's Great Plateau more than Tears of the Kingdom's rehashing in the form of the Great Sky Island. To be honest though, I would take Wind Waker's introduction over both of these. I would even take Wind Waker the game itself over Tears of the Kingdom if we're being honest.
Whoa! That snail is fast! What? Are you seeing this?
Remember earlier how I said, with no strict directional guidance after the Great Plateau, you almost start to feel somewhat isolated, traveling across a towering yet peaceful world all by yourself. Well, I wouldn't say the same for Tears of the Kingdom. While the pacing in Tears of the Kingdom kind of relates to the atmosphere and story, it's still a topic focus itself. Simply put, the pacing in Tears of the Kingdom feels a lot faster than it did in Breath of the Wild. Instead of one huge overworld to explore in Breath of the Wild, which can honestly itself feel quite intimidating, now you have to re-explore that same overworld, an underworld nearly equal in size, and various sky islands that are usually quite laborious to reach. With all this new territory and familiar territory to explore, you definitely feel the time pressure to stay on the move. This aspect is one of the main reasons I think I didn't enjoy Tears of the Kingdom as much. I was much older now, I had a job, and I was doing college full-time as a high school student. I simply didn't have the leisure to play without worrying about the time like I did when I played Breath of the Wild for the first time. Now I still put 150 hours into Tears of the Kingdom, but that's not much considering I have 370 hours of Breath of the Wild just on my main account. Yes, traveling the overworld in Tears of the Kingdom didn't take as long because I was already quite familiar with the territory, but there's a lot of new stuff to do and find. The stables are different, the shrine locations change, and even the Koroks have new hiding spots. The overworld got a bit more depth to it with the inclusion of caves. And additionally, the new and honestly probably improved side quests / side adventures / side whatever were great to see. These are some great changes I was hoping for, and I'm glad Nintendo made these. But the end result with the entire depths and the Sky Islands made Tears of the Kingdom as a whole just feel overwhelming. Not to mention that the story is actually in the moment this time, so you feel a sense of urgency that definitely wasn't there in Breath of the Wild, though I kinda liked it that way. Lastly, the main new feature of Tears of the Kingdom is about building and creating, which is not very fun for a guy who definitely lacks creativity and engineering skills, cause I started to feel like I was falling behind and couldn't grasp what most of other players were clearly mastering.
You're still a mystery to me, Pickles. What's your story?
My story.
I love Breath of the Wild, but I'm not a huge fan of the story execution if we're being honest. Sure, waking up in a fallow world after sleeping in a chamber for 100 years is pretty cool, but throughout the entire playthrough, it feels like the story is stuck in the past. No matter who you talk to, it's all about what happened in the past, the divine beasts and the champions who are dead. I get it, you don't really feel the reality of being asleep for 100 years unless it's strongly stressed, but like, the memory system doesn't really satisfy any need in the game besides your own curiosity. I want to feel like I'm in the story in the present moment, not the story of a century ago. But at least the story was somewhat understandable, unlike whatever the heck Tears of the Kingdom story is. After putting over 150 hours into the game and beating it twice, all I know is that Zelda disappeared into the past because that's apparently a side effect of falling, and then she turned into a dragon. Maybe I wouldn't have been so lost if the game auto-corrected the order of the memories. Seriously, if you watch even one of these out of order, everything gets screwed up. Not to mention that it takes about 5 minutes just walking around the geoglyphs just to find the right spot to activate the memory. The return of the memory system certainly doesn't help my whole issue of Tears of the Kingdom feeling too similar to Breath of the Wild. Honestly, Breath of the Wild had the same issues with Tears of the Kingdom's memories. It just depends if you enjoy aimlessly searching for a very specific location or losing your mind walking around ridiculously big paintings. With Breath of the Wild though, it didn't really matter if you watched out of order because most of the memories are irrelevant besides knowing more about Zelda's personality. All you really need is the one of her getting ready to head to Mount Lunebrew, and the one when she returns failing. As long as you get those two, you're good in my opinion. Or just skip them all, it doesn't really matter because you don't miss much. What the game does lack in story, it exponentially makes up for in gameplay and overall enjoyment experience. But like, come on Nintendo, if you're gonna market Tears of the Kingdom about being all about the sky and then lie about that, at least make a good story that the average person can follow. I shouldn't have to watch, and people shouldn't have to make 90+ long minute videos explaining the story that you so poorly executed. At least Ganondorf actually looks like Ganondorf this time around. Oh, no, of course, they had to turn him into another animal. Here we go again.
My best friend Kyle will be there. Hi.
Alright, I'm just gonna set it straight. The champions are objectively better than the sages, and you cannot change my mind. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about their dungeons, but their abilities and how they interact with you when you unlock them. If you think the sages are better, that's great, but I would love to hear your reasoning, because I promise you will never ever change my mind on this. Frankly, the abilities provided from the champions are just all better than the sages. Now, the sages' abilities didn't necessarily need to be better, but Nintendo had to at least keep it somewhat close to the effectiveness of their predecessors. But my biggest issue with the sages is how they operate. They're just simply annoying to have on screen, especially when in combat. Just trying to get close enough to activate their ability is a total nightmare, and even more so when you're in a small area with not much ground. Considering the sages provide such little assistance and are a constant annoyance to have on screen, I just simply disable the sages. I don't need them. They're not worth activating for me. Breath of the Wild's champions were simple. You always had them on you, but they only appeared when you activated them. When I say that Breath of the Wild feels more independent, isolated, and relaxing, and Tears of the Kingdom is more chaotic and overwhelming, the champions and sages comparison is a great example.
What is that thing?
Alright, at this point you're probably thinking, oh, this guy doesn't like the Koroks in Tears of the Kingdom because they're too similar to the ones in Breath of the Wild. And yeah, you'd be correct somewhat. I realize that Koroks aren't a big deal for a lot of people, and understandably so, of course. But as someone who got all 900 Koroks in Breath of the Wild, Koroks mean more to me than they mean to the average player. Let's look at some of the similarities and differences between Breath of the Wild's and Tears of the Kingdom's Koroks. Same character design, same purpose, sound effects, and even the seed design itself is the same. Come on, Nintendo, you couldn't even change that? Now, some of the good changes were the new puzzle designs and locations. At least we got that. While I can understand why Koroks were not present in the depths since it's practically the same size as the overworld, I was a little disappointed. The depths are already so empty and boring. I mean, having some cheery Koroks here and there probably would have made the depth experience a little bit better, but also much harder regarding finding the Koroks. Similarly, I was glad the Koroks appeared in the sky, but some of the islands are very tough to reach, thus also making reaching certain Koroks quite difficult as well. I didn't like how a lot of Koroks had to be completed via building, but I admit that it's a good way of getting the player to interact with the abilities more. I just didn't bother 100%ing Tears of the Kingdom because I never felt the desire to do so like I did with Breath of the Wild. But enough of that side stuff, let me get to the main issue with these Korok folks. Sure, I can whine and complain about the little things like design, sound, and the sword all day long, but the main problem is that the Koroks serve the exact same purpose as they did in Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild had this problem too. Once you max out your inventory, all the other Korok seeds you have left over serve you very little purpose besides Hestu's gift, which doesn't do anything, and counting for 100%. This was Tears of the Kingdom's perfect opportunity to capitalize on a previous mistake while being different from Breath of the Wild at the same time.
But nay.
Why can't Koroks just mean more? Why?
Look at you.
Yeah, I know I disgust you.
No, I mean, how did you get up there?
When I say accessibility, I'm referring to the lack of accessibility to the Sky Islands in Tears of the Kingdom. Early on in my playthrough, I realized that reaching the Sky Islands was incredibly difficult, so my plan was to explore the overworld and depths, hoping that when I finished those areas, I would have found an easier way to reach the sky by then. After all, there aren't that many islands compared to the area of the overworld and depths, so I didn't think it would take that long. Sadly, even after I defeated Ganon, I still couldn't find a reliable way to reach most of the Sky Islands. If I couldn't reach a certain Sky Island via a tower, I usually never reached it. And that's because a majority of the islands can only be reached via building and creating. Now I'm sure there are some of you watching and thinking, oh well that's just a skill issue, and maybe it is. The reality is that some people are just very creative and talented at engineering, and some like me aren't. Even basic engineering like building a raft can be challenging at times. It's not like I don't like challenges. I mean, I got all 900 Koroks in Breath of the Wild and never complained about that. It's just certain challenges affect people differently. Engineering is simply not my strong suit, and it's obviously not my college major. It's just frustrating when I can't access the new territory because I lack basic engineering skills. Breath of the Wild fit my style better because you don't have to build or create anything to explore. All you need is strength, navigation skills, and appropriate materials. A more simple and realistic adventure.
Guys, look. La boom la la cacahuite.
Well, this shouldn't be a shocker to anyone getting this far. There's not really any much left to say except I don't like building, and especially not in Zelda. Obviously, I'm glad Tears of the Kingdom's runes are different from Breath of the Wild's, but building and crafting ain't it. Breath of the Wild's runes, the remote bomb, stasis, cryonis, and magnesis felt simpler. They weren't the highlight of the game, unlike Tears of the Kingdom where the new runes Ultra Hand and Auto Build are the highlight. Admittedly, we were pretty spoiled with unlimited bombs in Breath of the Wild, but with the whole weapon durability phenomenon and all the nooks and crannies, I can kinda see why Nintendo gave us that luxury. Overall, Breath of the Wild's runes didn't define the game, but the runes in Tears of the Kingdom do define it. I also find it funny how so many people were so quick to note all the ways Breath of the Wild was different from traditional Zelda games, but yet I never heard those same people complaining about the building mechanism in Tears of the Kingdom. When have building vehicles and operating machinery devices ever appeared in Zelda games before? Show me people, I would love to see it.
Adventures out there!
Overall, exploration in Tears of the Kingdom feels very bland compared to exploration in Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild provided a brand new world no one had seen before, so it automatically had that early advantage on Tears of the Kingdom from the start. But Tears of the Kingdom could have produced that same feeling even while recycling all of Breath of the Wild's overworld if the new Terry was actually made well. The sky and depths are so undercooked and boring that, again, the main overworld, which looks very similar to Breath of the Wild's, is the main entertainment spot. Changes like the caves gave the overworld somewhat of a distinct feeling, but Nintendo needed to do a lot more than that. As for the new towers, while their launching mechanism is very useful for reaching the sky and I love it, they also allow for skipping large amounts of land traveling, which definitely tones down the exploration adventure a bit. Ultimately, when you make a sequel game where the new territory is just not very good, and the old stuff is still the best part, your exploration experience just won't be as enjoyable because it's not really new. It's quite unfortunate that exploration was not more focused on the skies or even the depths, but considering their miserable states, I can see why Nintendo relied on their bread and butter here.
This is everything.
Naturally, it's harder for a sequel to create better connections than its predecessor, so I don't want to be too hard on Tears of the Kingdom. Breath of the Wild was so amazing that topping it seemed nearly inconceivable. The new Hyrule, a kingdom that was actually an open world giving you absolute freedom, felt magical the first time around. I believe Tears of the Kingdom had the same potential. I wanted it to be better. The creation of the Sky Islands and depths seemed just like what Breath of the Wild sequel needed. In an alternate universe, these new territories are amazing and nearly capturing what the overworld did. But we have to face reality. And my reality is that the depths and Sky Islands were both terribly executed and implemented, paling in comparison to the overworld. While Hyrule still maintains its magic because of its nearly identical rehashing, for most, it now feels like a giant sandbox mode of build and create whatever you want. We're all different, but it's a fact when I say that I personally made better connections with Breath of the Wild than I did with Tears of the Kingdom.
I've enjoyed the chase, Gato. But I think we've reached the end now, you and I.
Well, this is the part where you're probably expecting me to say something like, despite all these bad things about Tears of the Kingdom, I still love it and it's a great game. Nope, I don't like this game at all. It's not a bad game, but it's not a good game either. It's really mid in my mind. But I won't pretend that there isn't a bunch of stuff that Tears of the Kingdom does better than Breath of the Wild. Both outshine each other in certain categories. But the beauty is that we all have different opinions on everything. What one person hates, another loves, and that's great. I'm not here to say that you should hate Tears of the Kingdom, or you can't love it, or that people who like Tears of the Kingdom are dumb. All I'm saying is that these are 10 big reasons why I love Breath of the Wild a lot more. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed.